Imagine a crisp autumn morning in New York City. The date is October 14th, 1950. The World's Fair is in full swing at Flushing Meadows, a celebration of the new decade. The air smells of popcorn and diesel. American families in their Sunday best marvel at the sleek lines of the latest Cadillac and the promise of the jet age. But as the camera pans up the Central Avenue, the triumphant brass band music begins to curdle. Fluttering in the wind, side by side with the stars and stripes, is not the flag of a defeated enemy, but the banner of a recognized sovereign power. The swastika flies over Queens. On the podium, a German diplomat in a sharp field gray suit shakes hands with Vice President Truman. Flashbulbs pop in a blinding rhythm. There are no smoking ruins in Berlin today. There were no trials in Nuremberg. The camps across Poland are still running, their operations protected by the ironclad clauses of a non-aggression pact. This is not a world where democracy fell to an invasion. It is a world where it compromised to survive. The war didn't end with a bang. It ended with a handshake. Welcome to the Stalemate. To understand how we get to that handshake in Queens, we have to strip away the inevitability of history. We look back at World War II through the lens of victory, viewing the fall of the Third Reich as a foregone conclusion. We see the miles of newsreel footage, the marching columns of GIs, the overwhelming industrial might of the United States, and assume that the Nazi defeat was just a matter of time. But in the spring of 1944, victory wasn't just uncertain, it was a terrifying gamble with odds that kept generals awake in cold sweats. Southern England, May 1944. The island is practically sinking under the weight of gathered steel. 3 million men, 5,000 ships, and 11,000 aircraft are coiled like a spring, waiting for the order to release across the English Channel. It is the largest amphibious invasion force in human history. It looks invincible, but appearance is a dangerous deception. To the men planning Operation Overlord, this massive force is fragile. It has to cross a volatile sea, land on a hostile coast, and break through a fortification line that has been hardening for 4 years.
Across the water, the Atlantic Wall is not a myth. It is 3,000 miles of concrete, mines, and heavy artillery stretching from the Arctic Circle to the Spanish border. And the man in charge of defending the critical sector, Normandy, is Field Marshal Erwin Rommel. The Desert Fox knows that the Allies are coming. He knows that if he can stop them on the beaches, if he can turn the water red within the first 24 hours, the invasion will collapse. He famously tells his aide, "The war will be won or lost on the beaches. We'll have only one chance to stop the enemy, and that's while he's in the water, struggling to get ashore." The Allied High Command knows this too. The memory of 1942 hangs over the planning rooms like a shroud. 2 years earlier, the Allies had tested the waters with the Dieppe raid, a trial run for an invasion of France. It was a catastrophe. Within hours, 60% of the landing force was killed, wounded, or captured. The lessons of Dieppe were written in blood. Amphibious assaults against fortified positions are suicidal without perfect coordination, overwhelming air superiority, and total surprise. If Overlord fails, there is no Plan B. There is no Second Fleet waiting in reserve. If the armies are thrown back into the sea, it will take at least 2 years to rebuild the landing craft and retrain the divisions. 2 years. In that time, the V-weapon sites bombarding London would multiply. The jet fighters, the Me-262s that Hitler is just beginning to roll out, would achieve mass production, potentially sweeping the Allied bombers from the sky. And on the Eastern Front, the Soviet Union, bleeding out by the millions, might finally lose patience with the West's failure to open a second front and cut a separate peace with Stalin. At the center of this hurricane stands one man, General Dwight D. Eisenhower. He is the Supreme Allied Commander, a title that carries the weight of the free world. We think of Ike as the smiling, grandfatherly president of the 1950s, but in 1944, he is chain-smoking 4 packs of cigarettes a day, his blood pressure is dangerously high, and he is haunted by the specter of disaster. He knows that the complexity of the operation is its greatest weakness. Tides, moon phases, paratrooper drops, naval bombardment, a million moving parts that all have to click together in perfect synchronization. And the one variable he cannot control, the one thing that can smash all those moving parts, is the weather. Eisenhower carries a secret in his wallet during these agonizing days. It is a drafted letter, handwritten on simple stationery. It is dated June 5th, but the year is left blank. It is his resignation and acceptance of full responsibility in case the invasion fails. It reads, "Our landings in the Cherbourg-Havre area have failed to gain a satisfactory foothold, and I have withdrawn the troops. If any blame or fault attaches to the attempt, it is mine alone." This is not the writing of a man confident in victory. It is the writing of a man staring into the abyss, knowing that one bad call, one shift in the wind, could break the back of the Allied war effort. The abyss was closer than anyone realized. The entire war was about to hinge on a single barometric pressure reading in the North Atlantic. The ships were loaded, the men were ready, but the skies were turning gray. Southwick House, Portsmouth. It is the nerve center of the invasion. Inside the library, now converted into a map room, the mood is funereal. It is June 4th, 1944. Outside, gale-force winds are tearing through the English Channel. Rain lashes against the blackout curtains. The trees bend and snap under the pressure of a storm system that shouldn't be here, not in June. In the harbor, thousands of men are already packed onto the landing ships. They are seasick, cramped, and terrified. They have been sealed on board for days, waiting for the signal. If they wait much longer, the invasion force will degrade from exhaustion before it even fires a shot. But launching them into this storm is suicide. The flat-bottomed landing craft would capsize, the bombers would be blind, the paratroopers would be scattered into the wind like confetti. The decision rests on the shoulders of a tall, dour Scotsman named Group Captain James Stagg. He is Eisenhower's chief meteorologist. In a war of generals and admirals, Stagg is a scientist, armed only with charts and pressure readings from weather stations in the Atlantic. He is the most important man in the world right now. The window for the invasion is impossibly narrow. The Allies need a specific set of conditions, a late rising moon for the airborne troops to see their drop zones, and a low tide at dawn so the combat engineers can see and destroy Rommel's beach obstacles. These conditions only align for 3 days each month, June 5th, 6th, and 7th. If they don't go now, they have to stand down 175,000 men. They have to unload the ships. The secret of the invasion location will almost certainly leak. The element of surprise will be gone. The next window isn't until June 19th. A 2-week delay gives Rommel 2 more weeks to pour concrete, lay mines, and move his panzer divisions closer to the coast. On the evening of June 4, the commanders gather in the library. Eisenhower looks exhausted. Montgomery is pacing. Stagg walks in. He reports that a complex depression is moving over the Atlantic. The storm currently battering the windows is ferocious. But he says there is a break. A small, unexpected ridge of high pressure is moving in behind the front. It might provide a window of clear weather lasting perhaps 24 to 36 hours. It's barely enough time. The seas will still be rough, the cloud cover will still be patchy, but it is an opening. In our timeline, Eisenhower listens to the rain hammering the roof. He looks at his commanders. He thinks about the men sick in the boats. He takes a long drag of his cigarette, exhales, and says, "Okay, let's go." That decision launches the Armada. The weather holds, just barely. The break appears as Stagg predicted. The Allies land. But consider how fragile that moment is. Weather forecasting in 1944 is not a precise science. There are no satellites looking down from orbit. There are no computer models running simulations. Stagg is relying on reports from a few lonely ships in the Atlantic and a weather station in Ireland. He is interpreting squiggles on a chart. He is guessing. Across the channel, the Germans have looked at the same weather data and come to a different conclusion. Their chief meteorologist tells Rommel that the storm will last for days. The seas are too rough for an invasion. Confident in the safety of the storm, Rommel decides to leave the front. He gets in his car and drives home to Germany to celebrate his wife's birthday. He takes the key to the Atlantic Wall with him. So, here we stand on the knife's edge of history. On one side, a miraculous break in the clouds that allows democracy to reclaim Europe. On the other side, a storm that refuses to yield.
All it takes is a slight shift in the jet stream, a variation in temperature of a few degrees, a delay of the high-pressure ridge by just 12 hours. That is all it takes to change the world. Now, look at the map again. Watch the high-pressure ridge behind the storm. In our history, it accelerated, but in this timeline, it stalls. June 5th, 1944, 04:15 hours. Group Captain Stagg enters the library. He is pale. He lays a fresh chart on the table. In the real history, this chart showed the opening. In this history, the isobars are bunched tight like a fist. "I'm sorry, General," he says. "The ridge is collapsing. The low-pressure system is stalling over the channel. If you launch now, you are launching into a Force 9 gale." Eisenhower stares at the map. The room is silent, save for the wind rattling the window panes. He looks at Montgomery. He looks at his chief of staff, Bedell Smith. The gamble is too high. A failed landing isn't just a setback, it's the end of the alliance. Ike crushes his cigarette into the ashtray. He rubs his temples and delivers the order that will doom the 20th century. "We can't risk it. Recall the ships. Stand down the airborne. We wait for the next tide." The order goes out. It is a logistical nightmare. Convoys that had already put to sea have to turn back in rough waters. Thousands of men, already miserable with seasickness, are ordered back to port. They don't disembark. There's nowhere to put them. They stay in the cramped, stinking holds of the Liberty ships, waiting for the moon and the tides to align again. The next suitable tidal window opens on June 19th, a 2-week delay. In war, 2 weeks is a lifetime. During those 14 days, the secret breaks. You cannot keep 175,000 men and 1,000 ships hidden indefinitely when they are sitting idle in port. German reconnaissance planes, taking advantage of a brief break in the cloud cover on June 10th, spot the massive concentrations of shipping at Southampton and Portsmouth. The sheer density of the vessels points to one conclusion: the invasion is imminent, and it is aimed at Normandy.
The intelligence reaches La Roche-Guyon, Rommel's headquarters. The field marshal cancels his trip to Germany. He does not go home for his wife's birthday. Instead, he stays. He looks at the aerial photographs and smiles. The uncertainty is gone. He knows where they are coming. He orders the 21st Panzer Division, his fire brigade, to move from their reserve position south of Caen directly to the coast. He orders the floodgates on the Dives River opened, swamping the fields where the British paratroopers are scheduled to land. He orders the beaches' mining density doubled. By June 18th, the Allied troops are exhausted, their morale sapped by the false start and the endless waiting in the ships. The element of surprise, their most potent weapon, has evaporated. Across the channel, the Atlantic wall is fully manned. The machine gunners in the pillboxes at Omaha and Utah are not sleeping. They're watching the horizon. And then the weather clears. The morning of June 19th dawns bright and cold. The order is given again. Let's go. The Armada launches, but this time they are not sailing toward a sleeping enemy. They are sailing into a trap. H-hour, June 19, 1944. The landing craft lower their ramps on Omaha Beach. In our history, the first wave met fierce resistance, but the German defenses were undermanned, the bunkers partially empty. In this timeline, the soldiers stepping into the surf are met with a wall of lead so dense it shreds the air. The 352nd Infantry Division, fully alert and reinforced by Rommel's foresight, opens fire from the bluffs. The water turns opaque with blood within seconds. The initial reports reaching the command ships are incoherent screams. Entire companies are wiped out before they reach the shingle. The engineering teams, tasked with blowing gaps in the beach obstacles, are cut down. The tanks, the specialized DD Shermans designed to float, are launched too far out. In the rougher seas of June 19, 27 of them sink immediately, taking their crews to the bottom. The infantry is left naked on the sand, pinned down by crossfire from positions that were supposed to be destroyed.
But the true nightmare is unfolding behind the beaches. The British 6th Airborne Division, dropping into the Orne River Valley, lands in the flooded fields Rommel ordered inundated. Hundreds drown in the dark mud, weighed down by their equipment. Those who make it to solid ground find the 21st Panzer Division waiting for them. There is no disorganized confusion among the Germans. The panzers counterattack at dawn, driving the paratroopers back toward the sea. By noon, the invasion is stalling. The beachheads are isolated pockets of slaughter. Eisenhower, pacing the deck of the cruiser Augusta, listens to the radio traffic. The success signal never comes. Instead, he hears commanders begging for evacuation. Then, nature delivers the killing blow. In real history, a massive storm hit the Normandy coast on June 19, the exact day this alternate invasion launched. It was the worst summer gale in 20 years. In our timeline, the Allies were already ashore when it hit, and their artificial mulberry harbors were wrecked, causing a logistical crisis. In this timeline, the storm hits while the invasion is still fighting for a foothold. The wind rises to gale force. The waves crash onto the beaches, smashing landing craft against the obstacles. The reinforcement waves cannot land. The wounded cannot be evacuated. The naval gunfire support, the battleships pounding the coast, is blinded by low clouds and driving rain. The troops pinned on the beach are cut off from the sea. At 1600 hours, Rommel plays his ace. He releases the Panzer Lehr Division and the 12th SS Panzer Division Hitlerjugend. They slam into the tenuous British beachhead at Gold and Sword. Without anti-tank guns, which are still stuck on the ships in the storm, the British infantry is overrun. The Atlantic Wall hasn't just held, it has snapped shut like a bear trap. June 20th brings no relief. The storm rages. The beaches are a graveyard of burning metal and bodies. The withdrawal order is given at 1830. It is a Dunkirk without the miracle. The small ships cannot get close enough in the storm. Men are forced to swim to destroyers, pitching violently in the swells. Thousands are left behind, raising their hands in surrender as the field gray uniforms swarm over the dunes.
Eisenhower sits in his cabin on the Augusta. He pulls the letter from his wallet, the one he wrote for this exact moment. He signs the bottom.
He sends the message to Washington and London. The troops, the air, and the navy did all that bravery and devotion to duty could do. If any blame or fault attaches to the attempt, it is mine alone. The ramp drops on the invasion of Europe, and it closes on a catastrophe. The Western Front is dead. The news of the disaster in Normandy doesn't just crush morale in Washington and London, it sends a seismic shockwave all the way to Moscow. In the Kremlin, Joseph Stalin slams his fist on the desk. To him, the failed invasion isn't just incompetence, it's a calculated betrayal. For years, he has demanded a second front to relieve the pressure on his bleeding armies. Now the Allies have tried, failed, and packed up. Stalin is convinced that the British and Americans have intentionally thrown the fight to let Germany and Russia bleed each other dry. The geopolitical consequences are immediate and catastrophic. With the Western Front effectively closed for at least a year or two, the strategic balance of the war tilts violently. In Berlin, the mood shifts from desperation to cold, calculated opportunism. The Wehrmacht no longer has to look over its shoulder. Hitler, energized by the miracle of the West, makes the move that changes the map of Europe. He orders the immediate transfer of 40 elite divisions from France and the Low Countries to the Eastern Front. These are not the old men and boys of the Volkssturm. These are battle-hardened panzer units, fully equipped SS divisions, and fresh infantry reserves that had been hoarding fuel and ammunition for the fight against the Americans. Now they are loading onto trains bound for Poland. It is June 22, 1944, 3 years to the day since the German invasion of Russia. The Red Army launches Operation Bagration. In our timeline, this was the sledgehammer blow that shattered Army Group Center and drove the Nazis out of Belarus. It succeeded because the Germans were stretched thin, desperately trying to hold two fronts at once. But in this timeline, the Soviet steamroller hits a wall of fresh steel. As Marshal Zhukov's tanks push toward Minsk, they don't encounter a crumbling line. They encounter the 1st SS Panzer Corps, fresh from France, fully rested and dug in. The Soviet advance, which was supposed to be a lightning strike, turns into a grinding, bloody attrition battle. The T-34s burn by the hundreds in the marshes of Belarus. The Luftwaffe, no longer needed to defend French skies, reappears in force over the east. The Stukas are back. The Soviet offensive grinds to a halt on the Vistula River in August 1944. The Red Army is exhausted, their supply lines overextended. They stare across the river at Warsaw, but they cannot cross. The German line has solidified into concrete and iron. Inside Warsaw, the Polish Home Army, counting on the arrival of the Soviets, launches their uprising on August 1st. They fight with desperate bravery, believing liberation is days away. But the Red Army doesn't move. They can't move. The German reinforcements from the West have locked them in a stalemate. The Nazis turn their full fury on the city. Without the pressure of a collapsing front, they methodically level Warsaw, block by block. The uprising is crushed with a brutality that shocks even this war-torn world. By the winter of 1944, the Eastern Front freezes, literally and metaphorically. The lines stabilize roughly along the 1939 borders. Stalin, furious and suspicious, halts all major offensives. He begins to hoard his manpower. If the West won't fight, he reasons, why should he sacrifice another 1,000,000 men to take Berlin? He consolidates his grip on the Baltics and Ukraine, digging in for a long winter. The race to Berlin is canceled. There is no race. There is only a vast bleeding scar running across Eastern Europe, where two totalitarian giants stand face to face, panting, bleeding, and unable to deliver a knockout blow. The Third Reich has bought itself time, the one commodity it was running out of. While the Eastern Front freezes in the snow, the West is burning. 1945 was supposed to be the year of victory. In this timeline, it is the year of the siege. London, January 1945. The Blitz is back, but it has evolved into something far more terrifying. In the real timeline, the Allied armies overran the V1 and V2 launch sites in France and Belgium by late 1944, stopping the bombardment. Here, the launch sites are secure behind the impregnable Atlantic Wall, and the Germans have had time to improve them. The V2 rockets raining down on London are no longer just nuisance weapons. They are accurate, radar-guided, and coming in volleys. Thousands of civilians are dying every week. The British public, exhausted after 6 years of war, is reaching its breaking point. Winston Churchill, the bulldog symbol of defiance, is losing his grip on Parliament. The Labour Party is demanding a review of war aims. They are whispering the word that was banned in 1940, negotiation. But the real horror is in the skies over Germany. The U.S. 8th Air Force continues its daylight bombing campaign, trying to destroy German industry, but the technology curve has crossed a fatal threshold. In our history, the German jet fighter, the Messerschmitt Me-262, arrived too late and in too few numbers to change the war. The factories making its engines were bombed to rubble. In this timeline, the factories are still running. By the spring of 1945, the Luftwaffe is fielding entire wings of jets. They are 100 miles per hour faster than the best American escorts, the P-51 Mustangs. The air war turns into a massacre. In a single week in March, the 8th Air Force loses 200 bombers. The cost is unsustainable. The big week bombing raids are suspended. The skies over Europe belong to the Nazis again. Then the final domino falls. April 12, 1945, President Franklin D. Roosevelt dies of a cerebral hemorrhage in Warm Springs, Georgia. Harry S. Truman takes the oath of office in a darkened White House. He is not inheriting a winning war. He is inheriting a disaster. He has a failed invasion in France, a stalemate in Russia, and an ally in London teetering on collapse. But he has one card left to play. A few days after taking office, Secretary of War Henry Stimson tells Truman about the Manhattan Project, the bomb, the ultimate weapon. It is scheduled for testing in July. In our history, the bomb was the knockout blow.
But Truman asks the question that changes everything. How do we deliver it? The generals look at their shoes. The B-29 Superfortress, the only plane capable of carrying the heavy atomic device, is struggling in the Pacific. Even if they transfer them to England, they have to fly unescorted deep into Germany to hit Berlin. Against the swarms of Me-262 jets, a slow, heavy bomber has a survival expectancy of 0. They cannot drop the bomb if the plane is shot down over the English Channel. Furthermore, German intelligence has hinted through Swiss channels that they have stockpiled thousands of tons of Tabun and sarin nerve gas. If a nuclear device is used, they threaten to wipe London off the map with chemical warheads on their V2 rockets. Truman faces a nightmare calculus. He has the weapon to end the world, but he cannot use it without guaranteeing the destruction of his closest ally. The concept of unconditional surrender, announced so boldly at Casablanca, is now a fantasy. The Allies simply do not have the boots on the ground or the planes in the air to dictate terms to Hitler. July 16, 1945. The Trinity test in New Mexico is a success. The mushroom cloud rises over the desert. It is a symbol of ultimate power, but for Truman, it is impotent. He realizes that the United States can secure its own safety, and perhaps the safety of the UK, but it cannot liberate Europe. Not this year, maybe not for 10 years. The war rooms in Washington and London go quiet. The maps are rolled up. The diplomats are summoned.
The decision is made not to invade, but to talk. The order goes out to stop the offensive operations. The guns on the Western Front do not fall silent, they just stop advancing. The world holds its breath. The stalemate has begun. Reykjavík, Iceland, October 19, 1946. The location is chosen for its neutrality, but the atmosphere is anything but peaceful. The wind howls off the North Atlantic, whipping the coats of the delegates arriving at the stark white meeting hall. This is not the Yalta Conference, where three allies sat in comfortable chairs to carve up the world with smiles and cigars. This is a business transaction at gunpoint.
The table is triangular. On one side sits James F. Burns, the U.S. Secretary of State, looking tired and gray. On the second side is Vyacheslav Molotov, Stalin's stone-faced foreign minister. And on the third side, representing the Greater German Reich, is Joachim von Ribbentrop. He does not look like a man whose government is about to collapse. He looks arrogant. He knows that he is not there to surrender. He is there to formalize a victory. The document on the table is the armistice. It is a legal recognition of the stalemate. It is a surrender of the moral high ground in exchange for the cessation of slaughter. The terms are monstrous, drawn up in cold, diplomatic language that masks the human horror underneath. The first clause establishes Fortress Europa. The German Reich is recognized as the sovereign authority over continental Europe, from the Pyrenees to the Vistula. France, Belgium, the Netherlands, Denmark, Norway, they are not liberated. They are formally acknowledged as protectorates. The resistance movements in these countries are no longer freedom fighters in the eyes of international law. They are now officially insurgents, operating within a sovereign state. The U.S. and Britain agree to cease supplying them. It is a death sentence signed in ink. The second clause cements the eastern border. The Molotov-Ribbentrop line is re-established, roughly following the Curzon line in Poland. The Soviet Union keeps the Baltic states and eastern Poland. Germany keeps the rest. The millions of people trapped between these two lines, the Poles, the Ukrainians, the Jews who have survived in hiding, are abandoned. There is no population exchange. There is just a wall of barbed wire and minefields that goes up overnight. The third clause is the atomic truce. The United States agrees not to deploy nuclear weapons in Europe. In exchange, Germany agrees to halt the production of long-range V-3 rockets capable of hitting the American East Coast. It is the beginning of mutually assured destruction, years before the Soviets even get the bomb. When the signatures are dry, there are no handshakes. Burns stands up, puts on his hat, and walks out into the snow without a word. He knows what he has just done. He has bought peace for America, but he has sold the soul of the West to do it. Back in London, Churchill, now the leader of the opposition, gives a speech in the House of Commons. His voice is a low rumble of despair. "We have not brought peace in our time," he says. "We have merely agreed to live inside a cage with a tiger, hoping that he eats the others first." The map of the world has changed. It is no longer a globe of many colors. It is a tricolor nightmare. The Western Hemisphere is blue, the East is red, and the heart of the world, Europe, is black. The shooting stops, but the silence that follows is deafening. It is the silence of a continent turned into a prison. Fast forward 4 years, 1950. The dust has settled, but the air is harder to breathe.
In the United States, the post-war boom is strange, warped by paranoia. The economy is massive, but it is entirely militarized. The interstate highway system is being built 5 years early, not for family vacations, but to move ICBM launchers rapidly across the country. Every school child wears a dog tag. Duck and cover isn't a drill for a vague future threat. It is a daily ritual. The enemy isn't just communism anymore. It is the twin specter of the Soviet bear in the east and the Nazi eagle across the Atlantic. In Europe, the silence of the graveyard has been replaced by the roar of construction. Albert Speer, now the Minister of Reconstruction, is reshaping Berlin into Welthauptstadt Germania. The Great Hall, with a dome so large it has its own weather system, dominates the skyline. It is a monument to megalomania, built by slave labor that the world politely ignores. The autobahns are full of Volkswagens. The cafes in Paris are open. The opera in Vienna is playing Wagner. On the surface, it looks like civilization has returned. But look closer. There are no synagogues in Paris. The jazz clubs in Berlin are gone. The libraries are filled with approved texts. The final solution has officially ended, replaced by what the Reich Ministry of Propaganda calls the Eastern Resettlement Program. It is a bureaucratic euphemism that allows the world to look away. But everyone knows. The diplomats in Washington know. The traders in London know. They know that the trains are still running to the east, carrying undesirables to labor colonies in the Ukraine, from which no one returns. But in a world of nuclear standoffs, moral outrage is a luxury no one can afford. The West chooses stability over justice.
The Cold War in this timeline is a three-way standoff. The technological race is terrifying. The United States has the atomic supremacy, with B-36 Peacemaker bombers circling the North Pole 24/7. But Germany has the delivery advantage. Werner von Braun is not an American hero in this world. He is a knight of the Iron Cross. His team at Peenemünde has developed the A-10 rocket, the world's first intercontinental ballistic missile. It can hit New York in 30 minutes. The space race begins early, and it is tinged with fascism. In 1949, the first object to reach orbit isn't Sputnik. It is a German satellite broadcasting the Ost-Wessel-Lied on a loop. It is a chilling reminder that the masters of rocketry are the ones who built the V-2. This is the psychological toll of the stalemate. In our history, the 1950s were a time of optimism, of believing that the good guys won. In this timeline, there is a pervasive, crushing sense of guilt. Every time an American buys a German-made radio, every time a British politician shakes hands with a Nazi trade delegate, a little piece of the collective soul dies. The world didn't end. The cities are standing. The children are playing in the streets. But humanity has lost its innocence in a way that Hiroshima never could have taken. We survived the war, but we lost the peace. We are living in the shadow of the swastika, and the shadow is getting longer every day. We often look at history as a solid road, paved with inevitability. We assume the good guys win because it is written in the stars. But as we've seen, history is more like a rope bridge swaying over a canyon. One snapped cable, one bad weather report, one moment of hesitation in a map room, and the world we know plunges into the abyss. The timeline we just explored is terrifying, not because it is impossible, but because it is plausible. The stalemate saved millions of soldiers who in our timeline died in the Battle of the Bulge or on the road to Berlin, but it purchased their lives with the freedom of an entire continent. It reminds us that sometimes peace is not the ultimate virtue. Sometimes the only way to destroy a monster is to walk into the fire, no matter the cost. The men who stormed the beaches on June 6, 1944, didn't just fight for territory. They fought to prevent the world you just saw.
They fought to ensure that the silence of the prison camp didn't become the silence of the world. So, I leave you with this question. If you were President Truman in 1945, staring at a stalemate and 1 million projected casualties to break it, would you have signed the treaty, or would you have fought on, even if it meant fighting alone, and even if it meant burning Europe to the ground to save it? Let us know in the comments below. And if you want to explore more timelines where history hangs by a thread, make sure to subscribe and ring the bell. History is fragile. Handle with care.